Hello, and welcome to this manufacturing management webinar in association with NLX. My name is Paul Fanning and I'm editor of Manufacturing Management. Title of today's presentation is Are You Being Paid for the Electricity You Do Not Use? And here to present today are Cynthia Granger, Senior Business Development Manager UK for NLX, and Damien Dowling, Business Development Manager UK, Energy Flexibility Solutions at NLX. Before I hand over to Cynthia, however, I should just say if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the box on the right-hand side of your screen and we'll endeavour to answer them at the end. Should we not be able to get to your question, please rest assured we will pass it on to NLX and they will answer it for you offline. And with that, it just remains for me to hand over to Cynthia. Cynthia.
Thank you very much, Paul. So good morning and thank you for joining this webinar. We'll be talking about the exciting subject matter of flexibility and how manufacturing companies can be involved in that. Flexibility is actually done globally, so each country will have its own flexibility programs, but today specifically we'll be talking about the UK and Ireland. What we want to cover in this webinar is why flexibility is important, how to enter into flexibility programs and how they work, who can participate and how you can apply that participation, and what are the incentives for participating, and how we mitigate risks for you in the participation that we help you with. At the end, as Paul said, we will have a Q&A, so feel free to ask any questions. And again, we'll send out the presentation with our contact details there, so feel free to also contact directly. Next slide, please. So why is flexibility important? The main thing is because the energy landscape is changing. We see factors in energy trends, regulatory changes, socioeconomic events, political financial stability. And we see that most of these changes have come from the pressure of being sustainable. And this sustainable pressure has meant that the supply and demand mechanism, especially in the UK, has changed. So now there is more sustainable generation, which is intermittent, and also there is more distributed energy. And what we see is that by going into these programs, you are able to mitigate some of the risk and you'll be more prepared for these changes. My personal view and the reason I work in flexibility is I actually think in the future you will pay to be flexible rather than a per kilowatt amount. And if you're getting into these programs now, you are standing yourself for that huge change that's coming in, and I think coming in quite soon. Next slide. So we see that more and more importantly to our customers and to manufacturers is the energy trilemma. How do we push that sustainable push that we've got, but provide greener energy that's affordable but also secure, so a grid that is stable? And we see that flexibility actually covers these three areas. Damon will go more into that in future slides, but it's important to say that this trilemma is important and that we see that flexibility can cover most of these trilemmas. Next slide. I'll hand over to Damien now.
So, thank you, Cynthia. So really bringing those two together, we looked at kind of the demands within the energy landscape and that risk and that, I suppose, resilience that's needed, and then how the energy trilemma is both at company level and at national or wider level. One really important aspect that we discuss with a number of our customers and questions that we get is around that, I suppose, resilience and risk reduction. And we can take that in two perspectives. If we look at the regulatory risk, and we should also look at the physical risk. So first of all, that regulatory risk, we see an increase in policies favoring more renewable energies and more sustainable practices. And this is what companies are feeling, but you can see this in many areas around the world. And then, of course, there's the physical risk. So what, for example, do companies experience with the increase in severe weather events? So when we have storms and extreme cold and heat, there are problems caused on our networks, on our energy networks. And that's really what I want to cover first. So within the next slide, we're just looking at an example in Lower Manhattan. We all know that extreme weather events are on our radar now and again. In fact, if you were to look at the news today, we can see that Storm Kathleen is on its way to the UK, and it's something that will disrupt a number of different, or at least there are warnings out there about infrastructure and about other parts of the country's makeup. But Hurricane Sandy is one example I want to draw you to, because it's one on a large company scale that fits with any country around the world. So you may remember the event. All of Lower Manhattan lost electricity, except for Goldman Sachs, that one company building that's shining like a beacon, really. Even hospitals and first responders didn't have electricity, but Goldman Sachs, as you can see, is lit up from top to bottom. So it's a great visual example of what truly is resilience within the world we're looking at today. But what we want to concentrate on and what we want to talk to you about is looking at resiliency in terms of what would this cost to your business, particularly if you were to be one of the ones that are left in the dark. What is the cost for lack of preparation? And really, from a manufacturing point of view, or whatever sector you might be in, what is the operational downtime? What is the cost of that, or damaged product, or damaged equipment? And the list goes on. Interestingly, the CEO of Goldman Sachs was interviewed after this incident and mentioned that 9/11 was an event that caused them to look at resiliency in a different way, and they built this building from the ground up in terms of being as resilient as possible and have that backup power as well. On the day before the hurricane, the team placed 25,000 sandbags around the base of the building, and the CEO mentions that he believed this looked ridiculous. But what's interesting about that analogy is that what looked ridiculous at the time is now seen as best practice with a number of companies who instigate smart planning. So what I'm hoping to really touch base on here is that we're in an environment where policy is changing for a number of companies. The pressures that they have in terms of showing that they are more sustainable, that they're energy resilient, but also the physical risks to these extreme weather events that are predicted within the climate change models. So we're not just seeing this within sustainability reports, but we have companies coming to us for help with annual reports and for help with project-specific planning going forward. On the next slide, we'll go back into that energy trilemma, but now I want to see it as less of a trilemma and more of an opportunity. We looked at really the equation and the balance that needs to be looked at there for companies, and I suppose reality of it is this is an energy point of work that every company will need to face. So when we think about, okay, we're going to mitigate risks, we're going to create visibility, we're going to generate revenue, really, how do we break that down and start discussing it around energy flexibility programs? So importantly, a company that participates in something like demand response will enter this opportunity rather than trilemma, first of all, is with sustainability. So that's allowing them to be citizens of the grid, or companies participating in the grid that in this example allows the UK to decarbonize, but also increase the number of renewables that we have on our grid. Secondly, security. So by entering into these schemes, companies allow on an individual basis, on a community basis, and on a national basis, the reduction of risk that potential power cuts could impact on each of those three facets. And then affordability. So these schemes, entering these programs, provides a revenue stream to companies. So there are a number of reasons to participate, but I suppose one overarching question that we'll ask in further slides is, are your competitors participating? You know, what does it look like for these advantages within your industry at a competitor level? And is that something you would be interested in seeing your business to look at? But I suppose what we want to go on to now on the next slide is what really is demand response. We've spoken about energy flexibility. We've focused in on demand response as part of that, and really we need to understand what is this demand response scheme within the UK. So really what we're looking at is for customers, for companies that consume energy, to shift the use of their electricity demand to times when electricity is more plentiful, or demand is lower. And by doing this, they receive a monetary incentive. So today we're concentrating on the UK and Ireland, but these schemes, I suppose the principles behind them are global, and we apply similar positions in each country around the world. Now, NLX is the largest global demand response provider. We have over 9.6 gigawatts of flexible assets. And it just means we're in a position to work with large multinationals, but also local companies because of the expertise we have at both of those levels around the world. I suppose the basic proposition of demand response is to support your business wherever you're based, to bring your assets and your infrastructure into a scheme that would allow you to create a revenue stream. So some companies find that they make 3, 5, or 10% reduction in their energy costs. And very importantly, there's no capex required. So there's no upfront within demand response, within the capacity market that Cynthia will talk about. There's no upfront charge related to that. But what's very important is we're not doing this just as a turn as a switch on. We want to understand your company. We want to understand how these costs can drive your energy efficiency, how we can look at the impact on operations. And really, are we sure that your infrastructure, your engineering capabilities can deal with the requirements that we're discussing within these plans? So what we've heard in previous projects and webinars and discussions is that companies are surprised how easy it is to enter this particular scheme and then to move on to other schemes. So on the next slide, I just want to talk about the mechanics of how demand response works. So we have spoken about, in general, how these schemes are to allow the companies within the UK to support the grid at times of risk or at times of stress. So when we look at the steps in the plan, if you were interested in discussing this with us and we went through the mechanics in general and met you and looked at workshops on how to really understand what it means for you and your company and your UK and Ireland infrastructure, step one would be very importantly to devise a plan. So that allows really for us not to look at you as company X, but to look at you as a company with specific operations in a specific sector that really cannot touch certain aspects of that infrastructure, but may be able to turn down other assets. So that devising a plan is very important because it means that we know and we're comfortable with the fact that you can move forward to step two. And step two is when demand within the national grid exceeds supply, there is a risk of a power cut. So that's when we would get a notification and we contact you to let you know that there is a potential for an event to be called, whereby we would ask you to start using this energy plan that we spoke about in step one. So if that event were then called, step three is enacted. And that's where companies that are participating are notified to activate their energy reduction plan. And what I'll say here, very importantly, going back, we understand that that energy reduction plan was built together with NLX and yourself, and that by saying activate that plan, we know it's a plan that you're comfortable with and we have discussed in detail. Step four, that reduction, if you can imagine, you might be one company out of many. That reduction allows you to balance the supply and stabilize the grid in the UK. So again, really benefiting the fact that your company will not be one of those in the dark. Your community that you work in will not be one of those in the dark. And nationally, it would have the same stability for the grid. And then finally, step 5, participants are paid for being on call. So that event might not be called. It could be, a warning to let you know that there is a risk. But if the event is called, that you are paid based on the amount of energy that you reduce by. And again, that goes back to step 1, which was the energy reduction plan. So just moving on to the next slide. I think what's really important here, we've spoken about revenue streams quite a bit. We've spoken about company level resilience and efficiency. But what is really important to point out is that this is a scheme that allows the energy produced by renewable sources within the UK to be increased. In 2001, we had 3% of the energy generated in the country from renewables. This year, it's up to 40% generated by renewables. And that simply could not happen without schemes like demand response, where companies are reacting to variations in generation. So, for example, when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, and there is a flexibility needed to help balance the grid, that companies and good grid citizens are there to be on call to help the country to navigate and stabilize. And this is very important for a number of companies. So maybe as a participant, you don't want to shout about revenue streams and you don't want to shout about resilience, but you might want to start looking at dashboards, as many of our customers do, around talking about the good work they're doing for net zero, decarbonisation within the UK and Ireland, and how that can really make them stand out from their competition as well. So there are a number of industries that are readily using this right now to show that they are getting involved in these schemes to really help care for the environment and take us on a journey to net zero. So I believe that covers the basic steps of the program and the resiliency behind those programs. I believe Cynthia in the next slide is going to kind of take us more into capacity market and really how you can participate.
Okay, thank you, Damien. So I think, we've gone through the advantages of it, how much, revenue you can make from this, but what does that mean to a manufacturing company like yourselves? So these are the different assets that we can work with. As Damien said, I'll be talking quite a bit about capacity market, and that is because that is the low-hanging fruit that we can help you participate. It's the start of, that evolution through flexibility with us. Many of these can go into other flexibility programs as well. But what we would do is we would look, first of all, your backup generation. You are testing that backup generation, I am sure, like a car. It has to be moved at some point. And we look to participate into your testing time. So you're basically getting paid to test your backup generation. And then there are other assets which have less effects on your process, so HVAC, LED lighting, refrigeration. So we work with you, as Damien said, on that devised plan to ensure that you're in participation in programs, make you the most money, but the least effect on your process and your core business. Yeah. Some examples that we can give of this is we work quite a lot with pharmaceutical companies, and we have seen companies save 5% of their energy costs by doing this sort of thing. And how we worked with that pharmaceutical company is we devised the plan by going into the site, seeing what's available in the market, doing flexibility capacity market first, and then evoluting through the different other programs that are coming up. And this is also evolving into new programs. This is a very fast moving industry, and we like to be, as Dame will go into, orchestrate you into the PES program, be your flexibility partner. Next slide. So Damien, over to you to talk about more about what I've just talked about, the different areas that we can go into.
Thank you, Cynthia. And we're very conscious today that we have kind of honed in on the pain points and some of the solutions. And we've really kind of not touched on the energy flexibility umbrella that does cover so many schemes. If you look at NLX, we are working on 80 different programs globally. So we could speak at length about each of those, but really as a gateway, as a gateway program, we wanted to concentrate on capacity market as part of this demand response today. But what's important to tell you is that by entering this with NLX, you are entering the potential of a number of different markets. So, for example, let's look at the top left of the wheel here. We see frequency response. And this program across the UK and Ireland is really one end of the spectrum, because it's designed to protect the grid from sudden outages, and that would be in large plants or transmission lines. And for this, we need to deliver a response in seconds, milliseconds sometimes. And it just means that we would need to have end-to-end automation. So we would work with your site in order to kind of seamlessly move to backup power, such as battery, and participate in this way. The capacity market, which we've mainly spoke about with demand response today, is on a different timescale. And it's probably most suitable for anyone entering energy markets within the UK that hasn't done so before. I ran through the typical steps from 1 to 5, and this is building your energy energy reduction plan that would ensure that your operations are sacrosanct, and then right up to the payment stage. But in between those timescales, instead of seconds and milliseconds, we're talking about 1 to 4 hours in terms of notification. So it is very much a more in control scheme for the customer, so that when you enter that scheme, you're really getting a feel, a hands-on feel, working with us for how much participation you want. And then we could move on to other schemes like wholesale trading, where it's very exciting, and it's pretty much I suppose real-time trading. You're not waiting for an event, but the nice thing about participation is that you can join completely and independently of your electricity purchase agreement. And most companies actually do demand response, but I suppose it's completely separate to their retail arrangements in this case. What I'm trying to get at is it's a very complex piece under the energy flexibility umbrella. And really the secret is knowing which market to be in and at which time. So in the next slide, I just wanted to kind of introduce how NLX does that. So as an aggregator, a term you may be familiar with, a company like NLX being an aggregator, you can think of us like the conductor of an orchestra, and that orchestra being all those programs that globally, 80 of them, but on a UK and Ireland basis, a smaller number. But within the markets, and all markets that I showed on the last slide, we're able to provide the benefits to you by reducing or eliminating the risk around performance. And if you feel that you're a company that has an energy load that would not meet minimum requirements in some cases, we can talk about aggregation, because our portfolio is so large. So we can help both large companies and smaller companies enter this complex market by working together on that expertise that we have and on that aggregation that we have. There are, I suppose, multiple value streams available, each with different rules, different participation criteria. So I suppose the most successful route to market requires an experienced partner, and that's why we're speaking to you today. It's to understand that we're here to ask the questions in order to make your entry bespoke. So what are the right value streams for your business? When should you participate, and when should you not participate? One role that we have is to remove the complexity from that decision, and it's really making sure that your energy assets are at the right market at the right time. Apart from revenue and savings, most importantly, that there is no disruption to your manufacturing, to your infrastructure to your business practices. So in terms of the overview of flexibility, we also wanted to give you an idea of the organization, and I'll hand over to Cynthia for that.
Yeah, so as Damien said, so thank you, Damien. We are the largest flexibility company in the world, 9.6 gigawatt for demand response, but also we are part of the Enel Group, a huge energy company, in fact, the biggest in EBITDA. We operate in 60 different countries. We have been operating for over 60 years and in 30 different countries. And NLX is basically within our innovation side of Enel Group. So we sit within that, and basically our view is to help customers, manufacturers and other customers to transition through this net zero transition that we're going through and help with flexibility. Yeah, next slide. So we just wanted to say that we understand that this is a difficult journey that we're all going through. Enel is experiencing this, has been doing this for many years. You know, as you can see from the maze, there are certain turns, but we are here as a partnership with yourselves. We have our own goals, as you can see, to help you through this part, and our job specifically is in flexibility. We are happy to talk to you. We also run flexibility workshops with yourselves, so we can show you what's available to you, and feel to contact us if if you'd like to go through that with us. Next slide. So yes, thank you very much for listening to us. I hope that's a lot of information to get in, but feel free to contact us. Our contact details on there. Like I said, the presentation will be sent, and will be great to have some good questions and Q&A now. Anyone have any questions?
Yes, thank you very much. We do have some questions here. One to start with this one. From a practical point of view, what does a demand response event look like? How do you know what to do, when to do it, and who actually does it?
Yeah, interesting. I can start with that, Cynthia, if you wish. A demand response event in the 10 years that the scheme has been running has not been called. So I couldn't say historically what an event looks like. We have in the past, companies, as I mentioned, are paid to be on call, and then if an event were to happen, that's when step 1 to 5 would be instigated. But historically, that hasn't happened. So if it were to happen in the future, the most important thing is that we have had tests with you, non-disruptive tests. We've understood the assets that you would turn down, not turn off, and we work with sectors. We're talking about airports, factories, pharmaceuticals, where really processing and batches cannot be stopped at certain times. And there's critical equipment, and then there's other equipment like Cynthia would have mentioned, which would be air conditioning, compression, and a number of other assets on site that when you add them all together, they can be turned down to a certain percentage and really add up quite quickly. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, because the event itself would start at step 1, where all the work we've done with you on a safe energy reduction plan is notified. We get notification to you 1 to 4 hours in advance, and then if that event goes ahead, you would have that time to use your building management system to turn down by the allotted percentage, and then if you meet that percentage, you get paid that amount, and so on and so forth.
Okay, perhaps move on to this one. Do you need any special hardware or software to participate in flexibility programs? What are the upfront costs that I can expect to incur?
I can take that. So with capacity market, no, you don't. We may need with existing generation to look at your metering, the level of metering you have, but essentially because it's a 4-hour notice period, essentially no. In terms of cost, if there is something that needs to be upgraded on the metering and stuff, we take all that cost on. So there's no upfront capex on this, and then we take it from your revenues that we make. And in general, the return on investment on taking it from your revenue is as short as 3 months.
Okay. Another one here. When creating energy reduction plans for participating in flexibility programs, are other efficiency opportunities or risks identified?
When creating, sorry, I'll just ask you to repeat that if you don't mind, Paul.
When creating energy reduction plans for participating in flexibility programs, are other efficiency opportunities or risks identified?
I suppose, as Cynthia mentioned, we are the innovation arm of NL, so we would very much be looking at your overall business in a holistic way. It's not just looking at one facet and it's an off-the-shelf solution. If it were that easy, then everybody would be doing it without us. But the reason for the complexity is that we do need to look into that level of information, so that yes, there's an energy and efficiency element. We spoke about revenues, but also at the other side, by understanding how you're turning down and what assets maybe could be more efficient, then we're going into that realm of really giving you feedback back on your site or numerous sites. So we would get that broad brushstroke overview that we could start having discussions on. And there are, of course, we're just talking about one stream within NLX. There are other aspects to NL and NLX that would go deeper into that consultancy and so on. So we all work together to make sure that it's bespoke to your company and not just, it's definitely not an off-the-shelf solution of building an energy reduction plan.
Okay. Got another question here. What happens if it doesn't suit me to participate when an event is called? Are there any penalties?
I can take that. So there are penalties, but that's the great thing of going that aggregator. We take those penalties away. So we take those penalties on. Why we do that is that we are working with you to make sure that you are suitable for it. But if there's anything that happens that you don't, there won't be any penalties transferred to you.
Okay. And probably the last one we've got time for now is what's the best advice you can give to a company considering energy flexibility programs for the first time?
Contact us and we can have a look and tell you what you can go into. It is, I've come from the supply business and I've been in flexibility before about 5 years. It is very technical and quite new to people, but I think we're the ones that understand it. We're the biggest ones in the market. We've done it with lots of different industries, so we can help you have a look to see if it's the best thing for you. And simply it's Half Valley data. We have, analysts that work on that, and we have systems that show what flexibility there is simply by taking your Half Valley data.
Okay. Yeah, 100%. What I would say is the reason for concentrating on capacity market today, part of demand response under that larger umbrella, is because there's a deadline in the UK of the 31st of May. So if you want to enter the capacity market from 2024 on, or if you miss that deadline, then it'll be 2025 on. The reason we're talking about that today is because it's the easiest market to enter, and it provides large revenues to companies, as we have highlighted. So I think the best advice would be, if you do feel that you want us to look at this, time is of the essence. And what we really need to understand is your half-hourly data. We can see a level of natural curtailment on your sites, and then we can talk about assets. But it's something we would love to hear from you ASAP, because to enter that easiest entry point into the flexibility market, we are looking at the next 7 weeks, I suppose. And it's very exciting. The pricing has never been higher for this market, and a number of companies are approaching us. So I'd say definitely, as Cynthia said, please do get in contact with our details here.
Okay. Well, as I say, that's probably all the questions we have time for. As I said at the beginning, if you have sent in any questions, we haven't had a chance to answer them, we will hand them on to NLX and they will answer them for you offline. But with that, it just remains for me to say thank you to Cynthia and to Damien.
Thank you
for joining us, and thank you to everyone else for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.